Is this you? Are you baffled by how support players can routinely get a vision score of over 100? Or are you just in general interested in learning more about how vision control works in League of Legends? Maybe a friend sent this video to you after you placed quote unquote the worst ward in Summoner's Rift ever. Regardless of how you got here, at some point you were interested in learning more about how vision score and control works in League of Legends. In this video, I hope to go over these points, as well as other general facts and data about vision score, vision control, when and how you should be warding, and other general key points to learn about the game. I've organized the information in this video into various categories based on League of Legends ranks. This isn't to say that diamond level knowledge is used by all diamond level players, it just means to say that it's more complex than something I've categorized as bronze level knowledge. So, that being said, let's get into the topic of vision control. Level 1. Iron. Your opponents are probably already better at vision control than you are. Your teammates will ignore spotted enemies anyways, and at this level of play, your mechanics are more important for objective control than your vision score. For this reason, you should focus on winning the game more than you should focus on vision control. It's not worth buying control wards either, because it's better for you to buy your items as fast as possible. Besides, everybody has probably already sold their stealth ward for a scanning lens anyways, and the only player who actually cares about wards at this level is the support, so don't worry about it. Level 2. Bronze and Silver. The idea of vision control boils down to what information is available to players on the map. By default, you have no way of seeing beyond the regions where your team is present. Therefore, only the turrets, your minions, and your teammates can provide any information on the whereabouts of the enemy players and their minions. For all intents and purposes, vision and vision control primarily refers to using stealth wards in order to gain vision in areas where you typically could not see due to the fog of war. At the start of every match of League of Legends, you are given the opportunity to select a trinket, either the Sweeping Lens or a stealth ward. If you do not select anything for a trinket, a stealth ward will be automatically placed in your inventory by default. Most players will want to choose the stealth ward, but the jungler and occasionally the support might opt for the Sweeping Lens. I will go into more detail later as to why the support may choose this, but jungler would most likely opt to use the lens if they intend to gank early, meaning they intend to enter a lane to kill an enemy champion, or to invade the enemy jungle, and they anticipate the enemy team. By default, when you press your trinket button, 4, it will place a ward wherever your mouse is located. I personally recommend that in your settings under hotkeys, you click the arrow down here to turn the trinket off of quick cast. By doing so, when you press 4 instead of placing the ward, it will pull up this indicator UI, which not only shows you the range of where you can place the ward at, but additionally the range of vision that the ward itself actually covers. If you attempt to place a ward outside of your character's range, your character will walk into range to then place that ward. Another reason why this UI is helpful is because it allows you to see whether or not the ward is actually inside of the bush, as indicated by your cursor turning green. Sometimes, a ward may appear as though it's in the bush, but it is actually just outside of it. And when outside of the bush, it provides no vision beyond it, and treats the bush as though it were a wall. This can be remedied again by making sure that your cursor is green before you place your ward down. By doing so, it will illuminate the inside of the bush as well as any range of vision that the ward has beyond it. Ward's visions are always stopped by terrain, or by other item effects, such as a control ward, oracle lens, or a variety of items and effects such as the umbral glaive. You can think of wards as an extra set of eyes on the map that allow you to see any sort of bad guys passing by in regions that you normally could not see. By doing so, you are able to track the jungler, or enemy bots that want to walk back and forth because they're too afraid of a blue buff. You can additionally track whether or not a blue buff or other buffs on the map have been taken by the enemy, or whether or not their jungler is pathing to other directions. Generally, you want to try to place wards in areas where the enemy jungler is able to sneak up on or gank your lane. For the most part, this will be the bushes which connect the river and jungle to your lane. In the bot lane, for example, you should generally try to place wards in these bushes so that when you're in the lane here, you have advanced vision of when the enemy jungler is going to try to approach you from these angles. Because of the importance of objectives, it's generally a good idea to try to place your stealth wards on the dragon and baron pits. However, you should pay attention to the timers of when these buffs are going to come up. When you look at your champion selection screen, you will always be able to see this timer at the top. It is important that you take note of this time, because stealth wards only last for a set amount of time, scaling with level, and you can always figure out how long they are going to last by hovering over the trinket in your inventory. In this case, you want to make sure that you don't place a ward too early, because in doing so, by the time the dragon actually spawns in 4 minutes, this ward will have long decayed and will provide you no vision, thus you will feel quite silly for having placed it. Typically, you should try to place wards along these objectives so that you are not only gaining vision of the objective itself, but also of the river. This doubles up on your goals of both gaining vision on the objectives and protecting yourself from jungler paths of invasion. When you place a stealth ward, it will consume one of your charges. Charges regenerate over time, and you can have up to 2 charges maximum. However, your wards do not gain interest. You gain no value from holding on to 2 wards for extended periods of time, and you actually lose out on the potential value of getting vision of obscure areas. For this reason, generally you should try to never sit on 2 wards without placing at least one of them down, unless you're completely pushed under your turret all game and therefore have no way to move to a good spot to place a ward. Even in this case, you should at least try to have one in a bush leading to your lane, in case the enemy jungler shows up. However, you don't always want to place your wards as soon as you have them. Think of the Avatar scene where they go into the cave and hippies try to light all the torches at once. The cost-benefit analysis is that you can either ward 2 locations for 90 seconds at the same time, or you can ward 1 location for 180 seconds. Typically, the benefits of 1 well-placed ward outweighs the advantages of 2 mediocre wards. For this reason, it is typically better for you to only use 1 of your wards at a time, but to not sit on them when they're on cooldown. Level 3. Gold and Platinum. Vision denial is the second component of vision control. For the most part, this will refer to disabling or destroying the enemy's stealth wards. The most common way to do this is using a control ward. It is generally a good idea to buy control wards because they can provide a lot of value by denying your opponent information, and they will control vision in an area for as long as they remain untouched, hence the name. However, you want to make sure you're not buying excessive amounts of control wards because you can lose out on gold that you would otherwise could be investing in stat-giving items, which would better help you achieve victory. The exception to this rule is for support players, whose job typically primarily revolves around vision control and therefore are often expected to use control wards more often than the other laners. It doesn't necessarily matter whether or not the enemy can see you if you're totaling 4 items and can kill them in 1 hit, but it does matter if you're losing fights because you've grown too anxious about keeping the red buff on lockdown and now you no longer have enough gold for your first item. Vision denial can also come from using the Oracle Lens trinket, which is also referred to as a sweeping lens, sweeper, scanning lens, or many other interchangeable terms. Especially as the support, you should always change your trinket to an Oracle Lens once your support item is providing you with free stealth wards. If you aren't aware, after reaching the income threshold and upgrading the support item, it will gain 3 charges that will refresh upon returning to your summoning platform. Each of these charges can be used to place a stealth ward by pressing the corresponding number for the item slot that the support item is in. So make sure it's in a slot that you're comfortable with, or rebind it in your settings so that you can actually make use of them. At the final upgrade, the item offers 4 ward charges total. Each player can place a maximum of 3 stealth wards, but because the default trinket can only hold 2 charges, typically only the support will reach this limit of 3 stealth wards. The support items give each support 4 wards to place when completed, which means the player will have up to 6 wards in total if they keep the stealth ward trinket and their support item. This is twice the maximum amount that can be placed on the map, and is typically unnecessary. In general, the support will gain more value from swapping the additional 2 stealth ward trinkets to the Oracle Lens trinket in order to start working on vision denial in addition to providing vision support. Generally, you will use the sweeping lens on bushes, the dragon and barren pits when you think the enemy has placed a ward on them, or to just clear vision in paths where your team will be walking. If you are a jungler, you can use the sweeping lens when you are approaching the bush or at the entrance to the lane in order to avoid being detected. You want to ensure that you activate your scanning lens before you have entered the range of where you expect or anticipate the wards to be. If you have already walked into range of the ward and you activate the scanning lens, it will then disable vision of it, but only after having revealed you to the enemy team. If you use the scanning lens beforehand, then you will not appear on the mini-maps and you will be more invisible than if you had waited to activate it longer. Additionally, you should not auto-attack the ward, as it will reveal you and give away your position. You should only destroy the ward as the jungler if you intend to remain in the area for a while, or if revealing the location to the enemy team does not compromise your capacity to take objectives, farm, or gank another lane. It is typically a good idea to put control wards in the major objectives, in the bush closest to your turret, or around the red and blue buffs, to see if the enemy is trying to steal them. When the vision is blocked out, the ward will have this icon above it, and it will not reveal anything around it for the duration of the effect, unless the ward is being attacked. When you attack the ward, it will reveal you from the fog of war, regardless of your distance from the ward, and enemy players will be able to see you on the map. Level 4, Emerald and Diamond. Knowing where to ward is just as important as knowing when to ward. I will show the following locations as my favorite locations for warding, and the reason why I think that they are good. When you're in the bot lane, it is most relevant to ward the bush here to avoid junglers from coming in from this section. If you are pushing up to try to take the enemy turret on either side, it's okay to put a ward in this bush to get vision of junglers approaching from here towards this section or from behind here, and vice versa if you're standing here, junglers approaching from this direction. I think a better ward than this one is placed to the dragon pit here, which allows you to get vision of both the dragon and this river here, and will allow you to see junglers coming in from this section. However, vision there prevents you from seeing junglers that enter from this bush or from this bush. If you are on either side and you're worried about junglers coming through this bush, I think it is best to ward inside this bush, either towards this edge, so that you get more view of this river, or towards this top here, so that you get more view, like towards this section, so that you can better defend the ward and get vision of both of these paths in. What's on screen now are some very good visualizations from another guide that was made by Sho Desu. I will have linked in the description. I recommend you give a watch through of this guide so that you can see some of these areas and weaknesses that you have when you only ward certain parts of the map, as well as when good times to ward, as well as what locations to ward as a support are. A key takeaway from these visualizations is that there are always weaknesses to the way that the region is warded, and the game is designed such that you shall always have at least one spot without vision that you can be vulnerable from. Even in the places where you do have wards, it is possible for a jungler or support to place a control ward and lock down vision there further, so never get into this disillusion that you're perfectly safe. My absolute favorite ward spot is right here, because this gives you full vision coverage of all of these paths through the jungle. However, it is also good to ward the very edge of this bush here, where blue buff is, if you want to keep an eye on the blue buff. because while this can give you less information than this top ward, this still gives you good information about whether or not the blue buff is up and whether or not people are passing through this section of the jungle. It does not let you see if somebody is taking the wolves or if they have just passed through this top section, if they are to hug the top of this, because the range of this ward is blocked off by this wall here, so you may not always see unless you have it out far enough. It's kind of difficult to have a balance between how far it is in the bush and how much of this region of the map that you can see. When sieging mid, you can place wards here or here, and conversely on this side, here or here, to provide vision of the region between these turrets where your vision fails to see, or if you're inside here and the enemies are out here, vision of them passing through this region. This bush here in particular is useful to have warded. I typically will ward on this side to get vision of this bush and the surrounding area. This bush is useful to ward if you are pushed up to this turret, or if you are taking dragon or some other objectives and you want to see if they are approaching from here. When taking dragon, your biggest threat comes from assaults on the side that you cannot see. Placing a ward here allows you to see the enemies on this side, but fails to give you vision inside of this bush. A ward here solves both of these issues by allowing you to see inside this bush. You can ward the tri-bush from the dragon pit if you place the ward over the wall like this. I missed here. But if you do it right, you can get it inside of the bush and illuminate this region as well. It is often rare that somebody will try to take the dragon from here, but if you are, for example, looking to invade their enemy jungle, you could potentially get some vision from going to here. Walking into the dragon pit to clear wards that the enemy has placed, or to place wards yourself, leaves you vulnerable to enemies attacking you from entering the dragon pit. The same is obviously true for the Rift Herald or Baron. Warding this side, or again using the same trick that we used to ward the Dragon Pit Tri-bush, can allow you to get vision of this outside region. A ward in this bush will allow you to see enemies on this side as well as enemies pathing through this section of the jungle. This is beneficial for when you, as a jungler, are attempting to take objectives like the Scuttle Crab or Rift Herald. Warding here is crucial for when you are pushing up against this turret, or to keep track of the enemy jungler going from the bottom side of the jungle towards the top side or vice versa. A ward here allows you to see this region of the jungle, as well as keep eyes on the red buff. And a ward here accomplishes a similar task to this ward. These two provide basically equal vision, but this one provides more vision of this area here, which is more relevant if you are trying to siege the top turret. You could alternatively place a ward here to get full vision coverage of a jungler or person that is walking towards this side or towards the top side. This ward, however, doesn't give any vision of the red buff. In the top lane, warding this bush is essential for control to see whether or not the enemy top laner is walking towards the Rift Herald objective. If you are on the left side, this ward allows you to see if the enemy jungler is approaching you. You can also ward this tri-bush if you have junglers who are opt to tower dive, and the same if you are on this side. Warding this bush prevents junglers from diving you from this side. This tri-bush, of course, is only useful if you are on this side and you think that the enemy jungler is going to come from this side, as if they have invaded you. However, this ward can also be prevented if you are on this top side by warding this bush instead. The best ward location for the blue side left jungle is here. as it provides the most vision of all the pathways that people can enter or exit from. However, you can also ward at the edge of this bush here, and this will provide vision of the blue buff as well as a couple of the pathways. However, you will not be able to see if the jungler paths from the wolf camp towards the river. A ward in this bush provides information on only the pathing between the backside of the blue buff and the main river. Placing the ward further in gives you some vision of the river, but I would still say this is relatively ineffective. The best ward spot is in front of the Baron Pit, such that you are able to see the pathway of the river. Warding this location allows you to see whether or not a jungler is traveling through the river into the blue side jungle from either the top or the bottom, and if people are taking the Baron, Rift Herald, or Void Grubs. A similar idea is achievable by warding the river in this sort of a region in order to gain vision of the entrance to the Dragon Pit and the exit of the red side jungle. If you are fighting for the dragon, typically warding this side of this bush gives you the most vision control about whether or not perpetrators are here. It also allows you to see whether or not people are queuing up to use the blast cone. Whenever I am the support and I'm fighting against people on this side, I tend to ward both of these areas where possible. I find that this bush here typically is not worth warding unless somebody is actively in it and you're using combat vision. When you've taken the enemy inhibitors, you can gain vision of both of the lanes utilizing a ward placed around one of these areas. You can also utilize these sorts of wards to teleport into backdoor. Another good location is here in the bottom. This gives you vision of the minions and people entering from both the lanes. If you want vision of all of the red buff paths, you can either ward the bush here, which allows you to see the red buff actively, or the bush here, which allows you to see around this further backside. Many people like placing a ward here behind the Baron when it is up because it is difficult for a player to click on. You can circumvent this by moving your camera away from the Baron, clicking on the ward in the back, and then repositioning your camera. If it's an enemy ward, your player will begin to attack it. My character has moved here behind the Baron because I was able to click there. You can alternatively move your camera to the top left of the Baron, and this provides a pretty clear angle that you are going to be able to click the ward from. If you're struggling with moving your camera like this, you can also use the directional buttons on your keyboard. However, you will probably have to tune them a little bit more to make this easier. Wards like these, that are against the wall, you could auto-attack from the opposite side of the wall. For that reason, when you are warding from the right side of the Baron Pit, your wards are more vulnerable to being taken by enemies which are on the inside. When you are placing a control ward, it is important that you notice the range of vision denial that it can actually exude. For example, you should not place your control ward at the very front of the Baron Pit like this, because the outer circle will be incapable of viewing wards that have been placed along this edge of the rock, most likely by the enemy team. The best spot to place control wards inside the Baron Pit are along these corners, because they allow you to see the vision from other wards that the enemies have placed inside of the Baron Pit, but they also inhibit this vision to anybody who is walking on the enemy team that does not immediately walk into this region of the Baron Pit, because this area is going to be obscured by the Fog of War. However, this is also susceptible to attacks from enemies over the wall, since ranged enemies are going to be able to clear them from over the wall of the Baron. This is true from almost every side, except for maybe this section, since the attack range is probably going to be out of most champions besides maybe Caitlyn or somebody with a rapid-fire cannon. The same is true for the dragon. Typically, the best warding spots for a control ward here are going to be along this corner or along this corner. I would more likely than not recommend in this region because of the same aforementioned reasons, that it prevents the ward from being visible by enemies unless they are approaching from this angle, and because it allows you to get vision of the entire dragon pit. This ward is extremely susceptible to being taken, however. If you want to create a situation where the enemy has to enter the dragon pit and become vulnerable to take the ward, place it on this bottom side when the enemy team is on the red side. When the enemy team is on the blue side, placing it closer towards the dragon pit entrance is going to be more dangerous for them to approach. When playing in mid lane, there are a few key areas that you could ward. Most often, I see people placing wards in these bushes. While this isn't necessarily bad, it's not necessarily the best place that you could be placing a ward, because if you're already pushed up towards the other side of the map, by the time you get vision of the enemy jungler on your mini-map, you're only giving yourself maybe a second extra vision before he actually reaches your lane. In my opinion, where possible, you should instead try to push further beyond this bush in order to ward places such as the corner here. Like we just saw with Master Yi passing through here, if you have a ward here, it's going to let you see when the jungler is pathing not only towards this bush, but also from the raptors towards the objectives in the river, that you may otherwise not see if you only had the vision extending in the bush here or here. You could alternatively ward at this corner here, which gives a similar stretch of vision, allowing you to see before the enemy has approached into the bush and part of the river. Notice, however, that the ward location here and here doesn't provide any information of this corner or this corner of where junglers could approach the bush, leaving you susceptible to ganks from these regions. The alternate area that you could ward if you were on the red side of the map is in this corner here, and this corner here. However, when you're able to ward in this area, more often than not, you should just ward this aforementioned location, as it provides the same amount of coverage as well as coverage inside this highly contested bush. An additional mistake that you should avoid making is playing away from the areas that you have vision in. So for example, say you are currently fighting in mid lane and you need to go place a ward down here, and you don't have enough time to leave the minion state here, so you just place a ward in this bush. What I see many players doing is then going and playing towards this side of the map as minions are fighting in the middle here. Not only are you leaving yourself vulnerable to ganks in this region where you don't have vision, but you're also losing out on all the extra benefit that vision on this side of the lane provides. Therefore, when you have a ward on one side of the map, you should try to play towards that side of the map. Because as a mid laner, you are often dealing with the fact that you only have one ward at a time, you can opt to use your control wards to gain control of the other bush, especially if you are in a lower ELO, where players are going to be placing their wards in these bushes more often than not. In higher ELO games, I would recommend using your control wards in places that are more contested for the objectives and the jungler pathing. Using the control wards to lock down key objectives, or as you are roaming to gank another lane, is going to be more beneficial to you as a mid laner than is simply having vision in one of these two bushes most of the time. One of the other topics that I would like to discuss here is what I would like to refer to as implied vision. So, for example, with the minion waves here, if we look at the state where our minions are now, we know that the state is mirrored on the enemy's map. So, even though we can't see the red minions, we know that they're here because our minions have crossed the midline here. You can use this whenever you're trying to figure out where the wave states are going to be at, if you pay attention to where your waves spawn on the map. For example, if I'm pushing up the top wave right now, and I need to shove in this wave, then I can't know where the next minion wave is, and whether or not I need to push this further in. However, I know that the red minions are currently passing by the first tier 1 turret, or tier 2 turret, because my minions are also passing through there. Even though I don't actually have vision of these areas, you can predict where the enemy's minions, and by virtue some of the enemy's players, from the regions of the map that we don't see. Another example of implied vision comes from analyzing where the enemies are not. So in this clip, I am playing as Kindred. and I'm attempting to invade the enemy jungle with my jungler in order to take their buff. I place a ward here, and I don't have vision of any of the enemies. However, I still get collapsed on. Now, why did this happen? If we swap the Fog of War and go back a few seconds, we can see that Evelynn spotted me at one point, and the enemy team decided to immediately collapse on me, despite not having any further vision of this. I could have already known that the enemy team was coming for me, however, because when I was here, I didn't see anybody else on the map, and we saw Evelynn here, so we knew that Evelynn was in the area. We should have assumed that the support and ADC and or the mid laner, who had recently backed, were coming towards lane and could have rotated and collapsed on me in order to kill me at this clip. And that's exactly what they did. You can see Evelynn placed vision here, but by the time that we actually noticed that they were there, it was too late. We could have used the implied vision from the fact that they were missing from lane and returning to know that they would have been here at this point, but we failed to do so, and as a result, I died. Knowing whether or not an enemy is present in an area based on the absence of us seeing them on the map often comes down to knowing the timing of where the enemies are going to be based off of the wave state or where the junglers have been. But it can come down to luck. Humans are ultimately unpredictable, and we cannot always tell whether or not a jungler is going to be on the bottom side of the map just because we previously saw him clearing the top side of the map. It could be that a jungler has gone to the top side of the map where there are no camps solely to go and gank that top lane. So ultimately, you should use implied vision with hesitation when it is involving the enemy champions, as it's far more unpredictable.
I have come home, Master.
The Master/Grandmaster level of vision score in this video will cover various tips, tricks, and specific game knowledge that may not be super immediately obvious. This part is going to be very technical, and quite frankly isn't extremely important for your average gameplay. I would say you should mostly just listen to this part if you're interested in learning about specificities about how the game mechanics function, or how certain champions interact in the game. Now, if you're interested in the specifics of how the vision score number that you see in your champion's tab screen, how that number is calculated, there's a good in-depth explanation by 3 Minute League of Legends that I will link in the description of this video. The last topic that I really want to discuss that's more mechanical is a little bit difficult to record footage for because I tend to do this naturally in fights, but I don't really have good scrubbed footage of it. So I believe that there are two types of vision control, active and passive. Passive vision control refers to warding around the map when you don't know where the enemy is, such as all the spots that I showed earlier in the video. This is basically how you're going to be using your stealth wards the majority of the time. Whereas active vision control is when you control vision when you know where the enemy is, either because you want to catch them off guard or you need to control a fight. So active vision control is the key component to the idea of combat vision. Think about this situation, wherein a ranged character steps out of the bush, attacks you, and then retreats to the bush where you can no longer see them, and therefore you cannot attack them back. This also benefits the enemy by reducing the amount of damage they will take from your minions, which I'll elaborate on further in a moment. This player is actively using your lack of vision of the bush to their advantage. You can control the vision in this situation by simply warding that bush, until they move to a different one. A similar situation has likely occurred to you before, when you're chasing someone who's just one hit away from death, but they entered a bush and you lost vision of them right before that hit connects. Especially as a support or an ADC player, you should keep a ward ready to place inside of a bush that your opponents can run away into in order to avoid these situations. This really is the core of active vision control and combat vision. Holding onto your wards or your Oracle Lens allows you to use them more effectively when it matters the most, when you're fighting life or death with the enemy champions. Trying to be more active in how you are using or denying vision during your next team fight might make all the difference. I recommend that you try implementing this in your next game. The trade-off of course, is that you're saving your wards and vision denial opportunities for combat, and in doing so, you are losing out on the benefits of passive ward placement, including setting up wards for teleports or for Baron or Dragon or other objective controls. There are plenty of guides which elaborate on how to effectively use teleport for ganks, split pushing, or for simply ending the game, and when you should be warding that. But I can also make a guide on that if it's desired, as I believe that is more nuanced and depends more on the timing of the game and macro than it does just a general vision control and warding guide. For the most part, if you are actively denying the enemy's vision, you will also be clearing their opportunities to get ganks from teleport or from backdooring or ending the game using teleport. How the minions react can tell you a lot about whether or not certain bushes are warded. Minions will be aggressive towards you when you have no allied minions nearby, or if they see you attack one of your friends. You can de-aggravate them by using a crowd control ability, walking away from them so that they re-engage your minions, or by exiting their vision entirely. Therefore, stepping into an empty bush will cause all aggroed minions to de-engage from you. If you step into that bush and the minions are still attacking you, it means that either there's an enemy champion or minion also in that bush, or they have a ward in there. Using the bush effectively can allow you to easily trade with your lane opponent or to control the wave position. And I can go into more detail on how to control waves if people are interested. Another very niche concept that I learned about recently is that if you have enable auto attack on in your settings and you're inside the bush, you will know if the enemy has vision in that bush if your character auto attacks the minions while you're inside the bush and the minions are outside of the bush. I don't particularly recommend this setting, so just know that that's a feature of the game, and if you already play with auto attack enabled, then you can use that to your advantage. Another concept that I think is very important that I'm struggling to get footage of in game, so I'm going to use a quick demonstration here, is attacking the enemy wards as soon as they have placed them down. This is especially important if you are a ranged character such as an ADC because you have an easier time doing it. For example here, if Vayne wards in this bush, Jhin has an opportunity before the ward turns invisible to immediately attack it, reducing it to 2 out of 3 of its possible health points. Now, the ward will still turn invisible, but it only has 2/3 of its actual health. Or if you're a faster attacking character like Ashe, for example, you can get it down to 1/3 health. This is beneficial because when you go in later with a sweeper, it takes less time to kill it. And additionally, if you have 2 or more characters in the lane that are capable of attacking the ward, or if your attack speed is above a certain threshold, I think around 1.5 attacks per second, you should be able to kill the ward outright before it goes completely invisible. This, of course, not only denies the enemy vision and gold, but also gives you some golden experience benefits. Another trinket that you can select that I have not yet spoken about is the Farsight Alteration, otherwise known as the Blue Trinket. Unlike the regular stealth wards, these only have 1 health. They see less distance than the stealth wards, and they are visible to the enemy champions. When destroyed, they give 15 gold to the enemy champions. The benefit of these is that you can use them at a longer range, and therefore, if you are a character with lower health, such as the ADC, you do not need to walk into range in order to get vision of objectives or parts of the map. The downside, however, is that they are visible to the enemies, and they only last for a short, brief period of time when they do reveal an enemy champion. There is a limit of up to 20 of these that you can place on a map at a time. However, these usually get destroyed pretty quickly, and therefore it is unlikely that you're going to actually reach that number in a normal game. I think that's only applicable to custom games. Otherwise, they function just like a regular ward. They reveal vision inside of bushes and in the radius that they can actually see it. Now, something that I learned as I was researching for this video, and I'm just on the League of Legends wiki here on the fandom website, is that there are actually 2 different types of primary ward. There's a totem ward, which is given by the trinket called Stealth Ward, and then there's a stealth ward, which is given by all of the support items. I'm not really sure why the trinket Stealth Ward doesn't give a Stealth Ward, but instead gives the Totem Ward. But it's a little bit confusing. The primary difference is that it becomes stealthed a little bit slower than the actual Stealth Ward. Stealth Ward becomes stealthed 1 second as in it turns invisible. And the Stealth Ward can give vision for a longer period of time. Now, it only says 150 seconds on the wiki, but I believe that this scales with your champion level in-game, if I'm not mistaken. Or perhaps it's just the regular, Totem Ward that actually scales with your champion level in-game. So it looks like perhaps the Stealth Ward given by the support item lasts for a set amount of time. Here are also the stats for the Control Ward, aforementioned, if you were curious for them. And then lower down also for the Farsight ward that I just mentioned. I was initially going to talk about the Ghost Boro and Zombie Ward, but Riot recently announced that they are going to remove them from the game, and as of the new Noxus expansion, I believe that they are fully removed from the game. Which is a little bit sad, because Zombie Ward used to be my favorite room. So, without further ado, let me tell you about all of the specificities of vision control in League of Legends. Oh boy. Vision is the most convoluted aspect of this game. I don't know how Riot made something as simple as seeing or not seeing so complicated. So, first of all of the dark section is referred to as the Fog of War. This is very common for most RTS games, real-time strategy, but in League of Legends, everything that you can normally see is called Standard Sight. This is the sight that you see standardly, or that every single champion has. Sight, as I mentioned previously, is blocked by terrain or brushes, and is lost from being nearsighted from these abilities, or from dying. Standard Sight is different from True Sight, which allows you to also see units that are stealthed or camouflaged, which, yes, are different things. Turret and some abilities and items give you True Sight. When you have True Sight, a pink eye symbol above such a unit indicates that you have True Sight vision. These are both different from Obscured Vision, however, which is given from Oracle Lens and Rek'Sai's Burrow specifically. Obscured Vision is unaffected by near sight, and it shows an outline or silhouette of the individual or item, but cannot be selected for unit-targeted attacks because the thing that is being revealed by Obscured Vision is not actually visible in Standard Sight. However, Obscured Vision, Standard Vision, and True Sight are all different from Unobstructed Vision, which is given from abilities that allow champions to traverse through or over walls. Unobstructed Vision essentially just allows the character that can go over or through a wall to see through and around the wall through their normal sight range. And, for some reason, Unobstructed Vision is cancelled by Near Sight, which makes it so that you just can't see anything until you're out of the wall. True Sight is also cancelled by Near Sight. Wards, Control Wards specifically, don't actually give True Sight. They give Standard Sight. Control Wards, however, also reveal traps, wards, and camouflage with True Sight. So they are a special case which reveals camouflaged champions like Evelynn and Twitch, but not invisible champions like Shaco. Which, yeah, that's right, Stealth has 3 different categories: Camouflage, Invisibility, and Stealth Traps, which are different from Stealth Wards. So, in very basic terms, Camouflage is the weakest version of Stealth. It only hides you from enemy champions when you're not in their typical range of Standard Vision, or in their Control Wards range, or in any other source that gives True Sight. Camouflage is weaker because the abilities which give camouflage are typically longer lasting. There are handy visual indicators that show when you are camouflaged and near enemy champions, or camouflaged and revealed to enemy champions, and therefore in their Standard Sight range. Here are the champions with abilities that provide camouflage. Invisibility is typically used on more short-term abilities, and can only be revealed by True Sight, but not by a Control Ward, because Control Wards, for some reason, do not actually give True Sight. Here are all of the champion abilities that give invisibility. All stealthed enemies, including camouflaged or purely invisible enemies, will be revealed in a ghost-like silhouette whenever they take damage. However, this silhouette still does not allow them to be targeted, and it does not remove the stealth effect. Finally, the last category of stealth are stealth traps and wards, which encompass the previous warding totem and stealth wards, as well as these champions' traps. Stealth traps can be revealed either using True Sight, Control Wards, or an Oracle Lens. Whew. Lots of champion abilities allow you to gain vision of stealthed enemies. However, whether or not using an item or summon or spell breaks stealth upon activation is extremely nuanced. I would recommend you just read through the wiki, but for the most part, you're just going to have to gain an intuitive understanding of which of these items actually reveals you based on the case-by-case basis of which champion you are playing. It's far too specific for me to really create a nice visual flowchart for this. Fun fact, for those of you who don't know, on release of Akali's rework, her W, Twilight Shroud, gave her another unique, very strong form of invisibility that caused all sources of True Sight, including turrets, to grant only obscured vision instead of actual vision of her, and I don't know why Riot ever implemented that, but it was probably the strongest form of stealth that has ever been in this game, aside from the 6 Sunfire Cape Evelynn strategy. That being said, they have since then learned from that mistake and removed it, and I would really be surprised if they ever added anything like that back to the game again. Now, this video is going on long enough as it already is, and it would be way too long if I were to go over every single champion's ability that provides vision. Thankfully, somebody already did that. I will link a description of the video which covers all champions that provide vision with their abilities. Thank you very much to the person who created that video. Whew. Alright, that was a lot, but I think I more or less covered the overall concepts of the different types of visions and stealth that exist in the game, as well as showed you a general overview of all the champions that can use these types of vision. I don't know why this game is so technical and nuanced for something that should be as simple as I can see them or I can't, but I suppose knowledge is power, and the more you know, perhaps the better you'll be at the game. Although, quite frankly, most of this you'll just have to get an intuitive feel for as you continue to play and improve at the game. That being said, keep in mind the wiki is not perfect, and neither am I, so some of the information in this video may be out of date or incomplete. I mostly just wanted to share some of my specific acquired knowledge, as well as to make this video all-encompassing, and to cover the more niche aspects of vision and vision control in this game. There are many ward spots that I did not cover that are also completely valid, and if you watch higher level players and where they choose to ward, you'll probably gain more insights as to effective versus ineffective warding spots. That being said, let's go ahead and move on to the final level of vision control and all the knowledge that you will need to dominate your competition with your level of vision control in League of Legends. The final level, Challenger. Your opponents are probably already better at vision control than you are. Your teammates will ignore spotted enemies anyways, and at this level of play, your mechanics are more important for objective control than your vision score. For this reason, you should focus on winning the game more than you should focus on vision control. It's not worth buying control wards either, because it's better for you to buy your items as fast as possible. Besides, everybody has probably already sold their stealth ward for a scanning lens anyways, and the only player who actually cares about wards at this level is the support, so don't worry about it. Thank you for watching my video. I hope it gave you a few good laughs, as well as some genuinely helpful information. I apologize for some of the audio issues, as well as the editing blips here and there. This was one of my first projects, and it took me quite a while to complete. If If you have any feedback, please feel free to comment it, and I will take it into consideration on any future projects that I do. Other than that, I hope this was helpful for you, and good luck on your future warding endeavors.